I spoke with US Ambassador Chas Freeman. He's an expert on China and was the lead interpreter during President Richard Nixon's visit in 1972. I started by asking what he sees ahead for China.
Well, I think the focus is shifting as a result of the war in West Asia. For the first time, I'm seeing evidence that investors see China as a safe haven for investment, much as they have the United States. They're watching this very closely. Others, of course, are absorbed with the news about the war. But the emphasis on technology development, on a more reasonable rate of growth for the economy, and the management of the currency, its internationalization, as well as its stabilization, or I should say stable change in its value, are all things that people are watching.
So if, as you say, investors see China as a safe haven, what will the net effect be on the Chinese economy?
Well, this makes China attractive to foreign investors. I note that China has now begun to issue dollar-denominated bonds, which are oversubscribed. That is to say, China, which is a net capital exporter, will now be able to attract more capital. I think the role of foreign investment in China has changed. Initially, or I should say for the past decades, much of it was the introduction of technology rather than capital. I think now that is shifting. China is holding its own in the technology area and beginning to be a major exporter of high technology. But it can always use capital, and there are some innovations that foreign companies have to offer that can benefit the Chinese economy.
Now, as far as the Chinese currency is concerned, where do you see that heading, especially the internationalization of the currency?
It's a slow, steady process. I don't think the Chinese objective is to replace the dollar as the major currency in global trade, although China is the world's largest trading country, but rather to add the renminbi, the Chinese yuan, to other currencies in an emerging system of multi-currency reserves and trade settlement. So this is something to watch, not something that is imminent, perhaps, but something that is slowly taking place.
Last year, China achieved GDP growth of 5%, but this year the IMF predicts that growth will slow down to 4.6%. What do you see as the major challenges to growth in the Chinese economy, especially boosting domestic consumption?
Well, I think boosting domestic consumption is, in fact, the major task before Chinese economic planners. There are imbalances in the Chinese economy, which are very evident. For example, a high unemployment rate among youth. That is to say, people who have a better education than the job market requires and are therefore forced to spend a lot of time looking for a livelihood. I think the answer to this lies mainly in the development of the domestic consumer economy within China, and that should be the focus.
So if we look at the challenges that China faces now with the conflict in the Gulf, how much uncertainty is there going to be over energy supplies to China? It does import much of its oil from the region, which travels through the region to China. So to what extent will Chinese leaders be looking very closely at this, making the necessary adaptations, modifications, adjustments that's needed if this conflict continues for any significant amount of time?
This conflict will give a boost to, if one is needed, to non-fossil fuel energy development. China's already the global leader in this field. solar power, wind power, nuclear energy. But in the immediate few months, China's better placed than many countries to survive the price shock and the supply constraints that the war is creating. That's because China has prudently stored up a great deal of oil in its strategic reserves and is in a position to moderate price increases and to continue to keep the economy going. Much better placed than other countries in Asia, like Japan or the Republic of Korea or India.
There's also been a great deal of uncertainty over the past year with President Trump's tariff regime. We've seen how erratic it's been and how it's been so unevenly implemented to China across the world, in fact. So how does China deal with that? I mean, do you see any kind of political agreement or political settlement so that there will be more there'll be calmer waters in the year ahead?
Well, you're basically asking about the state of Sino-American relations, and I would say that they are strategically deadlocked. There's an impasse, no expectation of a major breakthrough in the relationship. Tactically, there are some possibilities, minor adjustments in the relationship. But you correctly note that President Trump is unpredictable, erratic, unreliable, and therefore his loss in the US Supreme Court of authority to impose tariffs has been followed by yet another effort to do so. And it's not clear what the future of that is. So I think the uncertainties are going to persist. And all that China can do in the face of this is to continue to do what it has been doing, which is diversifying its overseas markets, reducing its dependence on the American economy, and doing what it can at the tactical level to seek improvements in terms.
In about a month, President Trump will be traveling to China, will be paying an official visit to the country. What are your expectations? Do you see any kind of major reset?
Not really. As I said, I think there is a strategic impasse. There may be relatively minor issues addressed, for example, more of the same sort of talk we've had. I gather there will be a meeting in Paris at the end of next week to talk about trade issues and the opportunities there. There should be more interest in the United States in attracting investment from China, but that depends on whether the American economy is attractive to Chinese investors. And the jury is out on that question at the moment for the very reasons that you mentioned, uncertainty.
I want to turn now to your views in what is happening in the Gulf, in the Middle East right now. You were critical of the Iraq war in the early 2000s, saying that the president at that time, George W. Bush, did not understand the world and was unable to handle in either style or substance the responsibilities of global leadership. So where does that leave us now? What is your assessment of President Trump's handling of this?
Well, basically, this is an Israeli war on Iran. The Israelis, as Prime Minister Netanyahu has publicly remarked, have dreamed for 40 years of doing to Iran what they and others have done to Syria. That is, reduce it to a country with only nominal independence and no nominal sovereignty, if you will, and no effective self-defense capability. In other words, eliminated as a competitor and a possible threat in West Asia. This is the Israeli strategy. Donald Trump has accepted the charge from Prime Minister Netanyahu of developing or causing his generals to develop a campaign plan, which they've done. That campaign plan is going to run into trouble, I would say, in a week or 10 days, as the stockpile of weapons upon which it depends is exhausted. Israel will lose its self-defense capability first, but the United States will follow shortly thereafter with a greatly reduced capacity to deal with the Iranian missile force. And the Iranians have a very clear strategy. Not only do they want to punish Israel, they want to eliminate the American presence in the Persian Gulf. And to that end, they are attempting to persuade the Gulf Arab countries that have American bases on their territory that the presence of those bases attracts an attack, and does not bolster their defense, and that they therefore should get rid of them. One assumes there is a good deal of diplomatic talk about this going on beneath the surface, where we can't detect it. But it's certainly, we're witnessing an escalation by Iran of the military pressure on the Gulf Cooperation Council members toward this end of eliminating the American presence in the short term, if not or certainly in the long term, if they can't do it in the short term.
Ambassador, you've had wide experience of this region as well. You were ambassador to Saudi Arabia. And what kind of impact will all of this have, not just on the region or on Israel or the United States, but the world?
Well, it's going to cause a price shock, a supply shock. 20% of the world's oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian Navy has apparently been obliterated. But Iran, like Yemen, Yemen pioneered the thought of a land-based blockade of the Red Sea passages. Iran has the ability to block the use of the Strait of Hormuz from the land. It does not need a navy to do that. So I think we're in for quite a long period of disruption in the global oil and gas trade. I note that Qatar, which is a major supplier of gas to the world, has suspended production. The other countries in the Gulf have differing problems. Kuwait no longer depends for its livelihood on oil exports. It has turned, though, its previous exports into investments which yield interest, dividends. Bahrain is in difficulty. Saudi Arabia exports most of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and its development plans depend on revenue that it will no longer have, at least in the short term. The United Arab Emirates also will find its oil exports curtailed, but it has a large enough slush fund that it can get through. Iran itself is going to be deprived of revenue, and the impact of that is uncertain. So this is a very dangerous and unpredictable situation in terms of the impact on the world.
Ambassador Chas Freeman, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.